And we are going to start with a discussion of the school effectiveness review. And that will be Chief Connolly presenting, or who will be presenting? Okay, good, thank you. Thank you.
So while the team is assembling, we want to thank you for allowing us to be one of the first presentations for the new school year. This is going to be a presentation to review the school effectiveness review results from the last year, and also talk a little bit about some of the key changes for the upcoming year. We have several members from our school effectiveness review team out of the Office of Achievement and Accountability who will be presenting this afternoon. We look forward to hearing your questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Kaufman. I'm the manager of the School Effectiveness Review Team.
Good afternoon, Catherine Toller, Program Evaluator on the School Effectiveness Review Team.
Good afternoon, Monica Jowie, also Program Evaluator on the team.
Okay, today we are going to talk about the School Effectiveness Review. I'm going to start by just giving a general overview. We're going to talk specifically about some process improvements that we implemented for school year 17-18. Talk about the results of the SERs, and then we're going to dive in deep to provide some specific examples by each domain, and then we'll talk about some next steps for the 18-19 school year. The SER is a qualitative review that we do with all schools here in Baltimore City. We've been doing it since 2009-2010 school year. And we like to say that although we have lots of data at the district, lots of wonderful data, numbers only tell part of the picture. And so we say that the SER provides an opportunity for schools to reflect and evaluate their effectiveness, understand and analyze ways in which stakeholders can and do work together, encourage and promote dialogue between schools and the district office. And then for our charter schools or our charter and operator-led schools, it is part of their renewal framework. And so the SERs evaluate schools against a set of standards which are aligned with the school leadership framework and with the instructional framework. So here we are looking at 4 domains: highly effective instruction, talented people, vision engagement, and strategic leadership. Under each of those domains are some key action items, and for traditional schools there are 12 key action items, and for charter and operator-led schools there are 13. As I mentioned, this is a qualitative review, so we spend 2.5 days on site gathering evidence. We collect those evidence in 3 ways: through classroom observations, through focus groups with a variety of stakeholders, and through a review of documentation. Using our framework as our guide, we give each key action a rating. So they would receive a highly effective, effective, developing, or not effective. For traditional schools in the afternoon of the 3rd day, we conduct a prioritization session, which allows schools to get real-time formative feedback from the SER, and then we help facilitate a conversation with them so that they can then identify one area of improvement or growth and create a short-term goal or action plan. As I mentioned, one of our evidence sources is through our classroom observations. And in prior years, we have used a binary tool in order to help gather this information. In an effort to provide more richer information, we decided to move from a 2-point scale or a binary tool to a 3-point scale. And some of the benefits have been to more closely resemble the instructional framework, to provide greater detail and more differentiation of the evidence that we're seeing, and then also provide more insightful conversations with team members and school leadership teams on site. And this is just an example of our previous tool compared to our current tool. And one of the areas that we look for is the communication objective. And so just as an example, in our previous tool, we looked for if the lesson objective identifies student outcome and was communicated to students either by posting it, explaining it, or referencing it during the lesson. And last year, in 16-17, we had, in 95% of classes that we visited, this indicator was observed. This year, having a 3-point scale, in order to get evident, the teacher had to communicate the objective to students by explaining or referencing it. And for partially evident, it was the teacher communicated the objective by posting it only. And so you can see we are getting much more richer, differentiated information by seeing that 62% of classes visited, this indicator was evident, and in 29% it was partially evident. So during the 2017-18 school year, we conducted SERs at 32 schools, including 9 charter schools. The way that those schools were identified is through, first, we always look at which schools are going to be up for renewal in the next year, so in 18-19. We then looked at our cohort of schools from our 13-14 school year, and then we looked at principal tenure. So if a principal was new to a school, then we made sure we wanted to visit them because we do believe that this is a great way to help develop our leaders. And then we also looked at schools that had consistent leadership from their last SER, but maybe their ratings weren't, wonderful. So having half of the key actions receiving a developing are not effective. And so 4 of the schools that we visited this year had new principals, and 8 of the schools had the same leader.
Why would a school not have a visit within 5 years? So some of these schools that have not had a visit since 2013-14, why would that be?
So our goal is to make sure that every school is visited every 5 years. However, there are always unique circumstances that may push a school to the following year. So that could be if they are in with the 21st century considerations. So we've talked to them a lot about what constitutes a school receiving an SER that year, or why we would postpone that. So it might be like 2 or more changes. So for example, if a school is moving to a new building and they are expanding and getting additional grades or merging with another school, that might be a reason why we would postpone them, to give them time to adjust to some of those changes.
Thanks.
All right. This next slide is kind of a 30,000-foot level of how the cohort of schools performed overall. So you will see that, as I mentioned, there are 12 key action items. Each one gets a rating. So we turn that rating into a numerical value. So highly effective would be a 4, and not effective would be a 1. And then we average those 12 key actions together to receive an overall score per school. And you'll see that the average for this cohort of schools, the rating was a 2.8. If you looked at the scores that they received from their previous SERs, the same group of schools, and averaged it, the average rating would be a 2.6. So they have improved slightly. Other kind of major trends that we're noticing when looking at the school as an overall cohort is areas of strength include planning, classroom level goal setting, and then just generally the classroom environment being positive. Areas for improvement include opportunities for students to engage with complex text and tasks, student-to-student interaction and evidence-based discussions, and school-level goal setting, analysis, and alignment of strategies. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to my teammate Catherine, who's going to talk more specifically about examples from each domain.
Okay, so as Brianna stated, our framework examines schools in 4 areas or domains. So in the next few slides, we've chosen to highlight schools with noteworthy practices in each of the domains. And I will say that what makes the identified practices noteworthy is that the practices were reported to be implemented at a level that was contributing to the school's effectiveness at the time of the review. So for highly effective instruction, we have identified Lakeland Elementary Middle School. Lakeland reported standout practices in 3 areas, but I will focus our attention on instructional programming. Lakeland reported that they were working to address the needs of multiple student populations, so students with disabilities, English language learners, and gifted and advanced learners, particularly through the dual language program, the implementation of the supplemental resources, and differentiated lesson planning. Moving on to talented people, we have highlighted Arlington Elementary School, and we will here focus our attention on specialized staffing particularly. So at the time of the visit, Arlington reported staff members designated for the full-time support of early childhood teachers and in the areas of literacy and mathematics. This support for teachers included at the time of the review, co-planning, observation and feedback cycles, and professional development. For vision and engagement, we are highlighting Franklin Square Elementary Middle School. They reported standout practices in the area of climate and culture supports, but I will speak on the social and emotional supports here. So at the time of the review, Franklin Square reported social and emotional supports for the larger student population all the way down to individual students. So you can see for the Tier 1 supports, using PBIS very strategically, as well as community meetings for the larger student body, then narrowing down to smaller groups of students. They actually had mindfulness and yoga and mindfulness, for identified student populations, small group counseling, and then the Tier 3 supports, including individual counseling for students and families. And then finally, we are highlighting Lockerman Bundy in the area of strategic leadership. Now, we know that the district is moving towards the 90-minute collaborative planning structure for staff next year. However, Lockerman Bundy, at the time of the review, had already embedded this structure into their instructional day, including the process of having visions and goals for their content teams. And each meeting was dedicated to working towards the vision and goals set for the team. These sessions were led by team leaders who were out of the class part-time and were dedicated to continuously following up on the work of the team.
May I ask a quick question? Or do you mind me interrupting you?
No, ma'am.
So this is something that is going to be instituted more broadly this year. Is that what you said? Did I understand you to say that?
The academic planning, yes, the structure of it, the 90-minute collaborative structure.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. And I will turn it over to Mona to talk about the follow-up of the SCR prioritization.
So as noted earlier, the prioritization session is a half-day action planning process that we implement at traditional schools to address the now what or what next steps. So we used to get feedback saying, you presented us with all this information, what shall we do with it? So we've implemented this portion of the process to step out of our role as evaluators and into the role of facilitators to support schools in creating an action plan that addresses an area of growth that was identified through the school effectiveness review. So that session starts with providing real-time formative feedback with the big picture in terms of the findings for our schools. Then we give the school teams time to process that feedback and react to the findings. And after that, we provide guidance for creating an action plan through which they create a SMART goal and a series of steps to address that goal that's meant to be a short-term action plan, with the hope that after participating in that process, school leaders could then turn around to do the same process with their school teams to identify and support another area of growth. So you can see an example of an actual prioritization action plan that was created over the course of this last year at one of our schools, along with a quote summarizing the benefits of that session. So the principal generally states that the session was beneficial because it allowed them to have an opportunity to process this real-time feedback and create an action plan immediately based on those results. So instead of having to wait until several months later, once the full report was received, they could begin to work immediately on this area of growth and were successful in implementing their action plan. So you can see the action plan on the left. The plan is focused around the implementation of a data cycle to support teachers in analyzing students' progress towards goals, and includes a series of action steps along with target dates and champions. Instructional leadership executive directors are also invited to participate in the session, and this year we had over 70 principals, teachers, and staff to participate in a session, with almost a quarter of the schools receiving support from district office. So this is just a screenshot of the School Effectiveness Review website. So it's recently been reorganized. You can see that all of the schools are listed alphabetically with a hyperlink to their School Effectiveness Review report that is the most recent report. Next to each school name, you can see the year of the most recent report, along with any relevant notes. So some schools might not have a hyperlink if they're a more recent charter school that has not yet had a school effectiveness review, for example. And these reports are used by a variety of stakeholders, including school leadership teams, which are using them to inform their school improvement efforts, such as their school performance plans. Also families to inform school choice. The community to inform possible partnerships based on areas of need identified through the School Effectiveness Review, and district staff, as mentioned earlier, for the purposes of renewal. So in terms of process improvements for the upcoming school year, we piloted unannounced classroom observations at our charter and operator-led schools this past year and found that to be very successful in terms of getting a more authentic snapshot of teaching and learning at our schools. So that's something that we're scaling to all of our schools for the upcoming year.
What was the reason for just doing the charters?
It was just meant to be a pilot. We were concerned about some of the logistical challenges to the process, but we wanted to start with a smaller subset of schools, and knowing that charters are high-stakes visits, we wanted to start with them to make sure that it was an authentic snapshot of teaching and learning. We found it to be successful, so we're expanding it to all schools. We've also made protocol revisions based on updates to the leadership framework with which the school effectiveness framework is aligned. And you can see that the schools are going to be identified based on similar criteria to this previous year. So of course, charter and operator-led schools that are out for renewal. In school year 19-20, schools that have not had a visit since 2014-15 or prior, prioritizing those schools based on their performance on the last SER. So schools that received more developings or not effectives will be prioritized over schools that received more effectives and highly effectives. And as we've done in previous years, all schools that have new principals will be visited towards the end of the year. That concludes our presentation. Are there any additional questions or comments?
Who makes up the school teams that are going through looking at the feedback from the review? Who makes up those school teams? Is it different at each school?
It is. So we rely on other district staff to help support our work. So we are only a team of 4, and we're doing about 32 schools a year. So we don't have the capacity ourselves. So we definitely reach out to other district staff that have a lot of knowledge and experience with schools. Classroom observation is one of the qualifications that we really look for. So the teams are made up of a variety of different folks, for each school, but we do offer a training that all team members will attend prior to their visit.
So it could be like a combination of teachers at a particular school, staff members at that school. It could be a combination of several folks.
So it's
Yeah.
district.
I think we want to clarify the question. So if I understand you, Commissioner McFadden, you're asking about the individuals at the school that are part of
Right.
that prioritization
Yes.
session
Oh, I'm
and the
sorry.
composition of those teams.
I'm sorry, yes, prioritization session is made up of course, school leadership, but we do ask them to invite other staff as well. So it could be teachers, it could be a counselor, social worker,
It's
whoever
based on
they
their
choose.
discretion?
It
and-
is.
And that guidance isn't given from the district
Correct.
as to who should be a part of that prioritization team?
We just say that it is up to the school to determine who should be in that prioritization session, and that we do recommend that they have no more than 10 people.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I think we'll be transitioning to middle grades. Strategy.
Commissioners, if you don't mind, we'll just jump right in, and I'm going to
Yes.
save my comment till the end.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dawn Shirey, Director of 21st Century Learning, and I have with me
Eric Manzak, Coordinator of Restorative Practice.
And good afternoon, Beth Sappy, Director of Mathematics.
So we're here representing the middle grades work group, which is a cross-departmental team with folks from across various departments in academics as well as human capital and other areas of district office. This team has been meeting for about a year and a half, and we started off by looking at research. Initially, research around effective programming for middle grades, as well as research then around grade level configurations and where students perform the best within those configurations. Then we began looking more specifically at things like research around advisory and other components that we were considering. We then looked at data within our district, academic data, climate data across different types of configurations, as well as started looking at teacher certification within the middle grade specifically, and student and staff surveys that were done last summer with students as well as with teachers at our middle school promotion sites. We then, as we were considering initiatives, we wanted to make sure that those initiatives aligned with the blueprint and that they were also sustainable and scalable. So we kind of looked at the district as a whole and what we were doing and what we felt we could really begin to do well. So the areas on the screen now are areas that we considered as we began to think about initiatives to start for middle grades. We looked at scheduling, we looked at course offerings, things such as foreign language offerings, honors courses, high school credit courses in the middle grades, extracurricular pieces such as clubs and sports, advisory components to really ensure that students' social and emotional well-being was taken care of throughout the day, and they had this sense of belonging, college and career exposure, potentially looking at thematic approaches to help students prepare then for high school choice. We looked at middle school choice, teacher certification, then of course professional learning, specifically along content for middle grades, as well as strategies and pedagogy for middle grades teachers. From there, we also looked at key factors that helped us to narrow down what our initiatives would be. And those were, as I said earlier, the current district initiatives that were occurring and what would begin to expand that or fit within it, as well as our resources as a district, both financial resources, people, time, and money, basically, is what we looked at, as well as capacity at the school and district level, and what would be doable and scalable. So we're going to start by looking at school configuration and size of middle grades, because this was really a big piece for us, and you'll see that in one of our recommendations. So the first piece of research we looked at was, does a certain grade configuration, do students do better in a K-8 as compared to a 6-8 as compared to a 6-12? And we found that the research really is mixed, and what matters the most is the actual programming that occurs within those configurations. For us, the programming and the resources we have for that programming really depends on the size of our program, and that affects our resourcing, which is why we started looking at the sizes of our schools. So the next couple slides really talk about schools that are less than 100 students in the middle grades in 6th, 7th, and 8th, and less than 150. And the reason why we chose those numbers is that a school with less than 100 students has about one section per grade level, which means one math teacher that teaches 6th, 7th, and 8th, or a teacher that may be teaching 2 content areas for middle grades. 150 to 180 is about the size of a 2-section middle grades program. So if you have less than 150, then you may have 1 or 2 grades with 2 sections and other grades with 1 section. And again, for us, we looked at that because it affects the resourcing we're able to do, the certification of the teachers, right, what they're teaching, as well as just components along what they're able to really do within that program. So you see these numbers here. We've begun to drop a bit in terms of, we have 57 middle grades programs, traditional. We're not looking at charters here, just traditional schools. 57 K-8s last year, 52 this year, one of which is a 3rd through 8th grade program. We closed several programs, and one program changed to a pre-K to 2nd grade program, which is why we're down 5. Of those, we only have this year, as of right now, because our numbers are in flux a bit, being it's the first day of school, we went from 11 with less than 100 last year to 7 with less than 100 as of the end of last week. And less than 150, we're down to 16. Now, of these numbers, one of the 7 will be addressed through 21st century school buildings, where we're combining schools again as we open a new building. And of the 16 that are less than between 100 and 150 students, 3 of them will be addressed through 21st century school buildings again, and 1 will be addressed through carryover portfolio decisions from last year. We look at the 6th through 8th grade schools. We have 3 traditional middle schools, and they all have more than 150 students. Oops. 6th through 12th grade schools, this year we have 5, and we only have 1 that has between 100 and 150 students at this time. So of course, our recommendation is that we want to ideally have schools with 3 or 4 sections per grade level, which is 225 to 300 plus students in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so that, you know, you have 1 teacher per each content area per each grade level. That I'm not teaching, 3 different math grades. I'm able to teach 6th grade math or 7th grade math, and I have other math teachers, even if they're at other grades, that I can plan with instead of being the only middle school math teacher or English language arts teacher in the building. It also allows us to look closely at those certifications within that, and then to have, with additional students, as additional funds, as additional resources to allow for the social emotional piece as well as electives and enrichment. So we are working, several of the folks, myself included, on this team are also on the portfolio team. And so we are looking at this through the portfolio process as well, and it will take us many years to get to this point, but we're beginning to look at it in that manner. Any questions before we move into the middle grades programming piece? Okay, all right, so we're going to switch to middle grades programming, and we're going to start with Algebra 1.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners and Chiefs. So we're going to focus our middle school programming around Algebra 1 today, and thinking about Algebra 1 access for students in middle school. So we've seen the research before. The research shows that we know that students that attend school and have Algebra 2 or higher are more likely to get a post-secondary degree, along with students that don't do well in algebra are really compromising their career options, especially in STEM fields. So thinking about the opportunities that we're giving our students and aligning them to the work that we're doing within this middle grades program. So we know we have students ready in all schools that would be ready to take Algebra 1 in middle school. We want to make sure we're addressing their individual needs so that we can give them the programming and the rigorous instruction in order to be ready for Algebra 1 in 8th grade so they can take the honors, more rigorous courses when they are in high school. We also are making sure that we want to focus on teachers, as Dawn said earlier, talking about the teachers in their certification, but really building their content knowledge and deepening that so that they are better preparing students for these rigorous courses. We're going to start by looking at the schools that currently have Algebra 1. So last year in 2017-18, we had 13 schools, traditional K-8 schools, offer Algebra 1 traditionally. So we're going to talk about virtual algebra in a minute. So the word traditional, we'll talk about like in school during the school day with a teacher. And then there was 1 traditional middle school and 2 traditional middle high schools, and 5 charters offered Algebra 1 during the school day. There was also the offering through virtual algebra, which we had 10 schools experience algebra through the virtual program last year. And that was the first year of implementation of that program. So this is a map that we have seen before that shows the students that are engaged in Algebra 1. So just to clarify on the map, I know there are some questions about this before, so we'll make sure we're clear. The black dot means the school offers Algebra 1 to students. So that means any school that a student has Algebra 1 on their course offerings for the day would be listed there. The red dot shows the schools that engage through virtual algebra. A school does not have Algebra 1 traditionally with a teacher during the school day and virtual algebra. They would have one or the other. So last year we had the 10 students, or the 10 schools in virtual algebra, and the additional 16 traditional schools taking it traditionally during the school day. Moving forward this year, and 18-19 is not included in the presentation, but for the school year 18-19, we have 21 schools right now that will be engaging in virtual algebra moving forward. So we've doubled the amount of schools that we'll be giving students access to. So with that, we know there's more students that need access to Algebra 1. So how are we going to do that? So one of the ideas, and something we're putting in place, is a cohort for middle schools. So this year, we're going to start with a cohort of 10 schools that are going to offer honors grade 6 math. So the makeup of our honors classes are, they would take all the grade 6 standards and curriculum, and also about half of the 7th grade. So in 6th grade, they're getting all of 6, half of 7th. And then in 7th grade, they're getting the rest of 7 and all of the 8th grade. So by the time they leave 7th grade, they have mastered all the standards that they need for successful 6th, 7th, and 8th grade content, which really gives them that trajectory of pre-algebra, what they would need in order to be ready for Algebra 1. And then in 8th grade, they would take the Algebra 1 course, leading them into high school where they would take the more rigorous courses and be able to take pre-calculus and AP classes when they hit their junior and senior year. So the expansion this year is 10 schools that will be incorporating honors grade 6. So that means next year they would have honors grade 6 and honors grade 7, and then the following year they would have Algebra 1. So they wouldn't be offering Algebra 1 this year. We're sort of easing them into that because the students really need the foundation from year to year in order to be prepared. We're also providing teachers a deep content course throughout the year. This summer they started, and they worked together for a week where they really did a deep dive into the ratio and proportions and thought of that trajectory of pre-algebra and what that looks like for a student to prepare them to be teaching and thinking about that as they're engaging with the students. We are also pending funding, hoping to provide a 28 to 30-day extension summer program for these students at the schools, because we know, although they are ready for algebra, but how can we give them additional supports to help them not have summer loss, focus in on that major content to make sure that they are really ready for Algebra 1 when they hit 8th grade, and also to incorporate that application and conceptualization of mathematics around STEM fields. And then additionally, next year we'll add another 10 schools, and the following year we'll add another 10 schools, which will be a total of 30 schools in the next 5 years that would be offering Algebra 1, in addition to the 16 to 20 that are already offering it at their schools. And lastly, just to show you,
I need a clarification there. So
Yes.
the additional 10 that you're adding each year in the next few years is Algebra 1, or it's this honors 6th grade?
honors grade 6.
Okay,
And
that's what I thought.
then every year, so in the next 5 years, then all those schools will be offering Algebra 1.
Okay.
So that's our trajectory each year. We would build that up.
I need to clarify a little further. So the intent is by 2021 or whatever, we will be offering Algebra 1 at grade 8. Is that what we're moving toward?
Not at all
Across-
schools, but
Okay.
most schools, and not for all students in the school, for students that are ready.
Only
So-
students in the honors?
Students that have been in the sixth grade cohort, or students that they may not be in the honors, but the school may feel they're ready based on a variety of data. We would then have to look at them and see if they're eligible to come to the summer program and show that they're ready for, say, sixth, seventh grade honors or algebra. The other piece to keep in mind here is that this goes back to size as well. If I'm a one-section school and I have 5 students or 6 students that are ready, and I only have one section, I don't have enough to have 2 different classes of sixth grade math or seventh grade math. So that's why the virtual algebra is really important as well. And we'll continue to look at how do we, once the grant is over, potentially continue that so that we can provide offerings, potentially even in the honors grades, at more schools because of those small sizes. So it is more complex than just adding honors and algebra in the 30 schools. It is looking at those schools that just aren't big enough to do it themselves at this point, given their numbers.
Okay, and I'm hearing that, but I guess I'm trying to get our general philosophy around algebra. At some point, it sounds like we're moving toward the belief within the system that we want to be able to offer algebra in grade 8.
Yes.
That is correct, and I
Yes.
just want to
Okay.
be also, I just want to make, bring clarity to the point that we want to put these systems in place to ensure that our students are ready for it, and not just say, you go in here and then you're not successful at it all. So that is the belief system, that is the philosophy, but we also want to make sure that we prepare them starting in sixth grade and then the summer learning opportunity as well, so they can be
Okay.
successful.
Okay.
So within these 10 schools that are going to start this cohort, are we focusing on the traditional middle and the traditional middle high schools within this first group of 10?
So this first group of 10 is focusing more on the K-8s, in those schools. So the 6-12s and the 6-8s, one of them this year will have Algebra 1, and the other one is working through virtual algebra, or the other 2 are going to be in virtual algebra. And then the 6-12s have Algebra 1 at their schools. So that's sort of working with those schools to focus on the teachers in middle school and how are we working with those students that could be in the Algebra 1 class with the ninth graders. So if they have that trajectory, they already are offering Algebra 1 at their schools, and how are they going to start offering it to their middle school students also?
But kind of like what Dawn was saying with the offerings and the size of schools, wouldn't the traditional middle schools at least have more flexibility in that type of offering?
Yes, because they're larger, so that was also, we were looking at that when we were making the considerations for the 10 schools that would be part of the cohort.
Okay.
Are there any more algebra questions before we move on to seminar?
So if a student is able to, at a school, be identified somehow for this virtual program, are we able to identify individual students at schools to participate in this?
100%. So that's the idea, is that once we get the PARCC scores, students are identified as meeting the criteria to be ready, so that during the summer, they're getting that summer programming. So the virtual algebra program is a little different than the program that we would be doing with the honors grade 6, 7, and 8, because these students get 8th grade math in the summer. So they do the entire 8th grade course in the 28-day program, and if they're successful, then they go into the virtual algebra program during the school year.
The 28-day course is what the Common Core, what does the 28-day course consist of for math?
So a team of teachers wrote curriculum based off the standards, the 8th grade standards, in alignment to our curriculum that we use during the regular school day.
Which is aligned to Common Core?
Correct.
Okay. And then if they are successful with that, then they qualify for the virtual algebra program.
Right, then they're enrolled in virtual algebra, and that's the math course they take in 8th grade. So instead of taking 8th grade math at their school, they're taking virtual algebra at their school.
And can you just tell me how those students are selected again?
So currently, we're running this through a grant, and so students that met a 730 or higher on PARCC at schools that do not offer Algebra 1 are eligible to apply. And once the students apply, we are working with RAND. They do a random sample, and then the students are randomly selected. And then when they're selected, they come to the summer program, and then upon success with the course, they are enrolled in virtual algebra during the school year.
Thanks.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner McFadden, if you already asked this, but how are the students selected for the sixth grade honors?
for the sixth grade honors. So the school is making the final decision on that, but we gave recommendations around using Park, iReady, their A-net scores from last year, teacher recommendations, attendance. So like really looking at the whole picture of the student, because we don't want to leave students out that we know have the capabilities and possibilities by just looking at one data point. So trying to look at the whole child and making sure we're making decisions based off what we think is best for them. And fortunately, if a student is not ready, they're still taking at the end of this course in grade 6, they're still taking grade 6 Park. So if we really feel by the end of the year that the student isn't ready for this honors programming, that they can drop back down to the regular 7th grade the following year. So wanting to make sure we are giving as many students opportunities as we can.
I'm sorry, I just one last, and it's just, I think, and I'm just thinking like a parent right now. Currently, the math curriculum that we're using through 8th grade does not include Algebra 1 necessarily. Because I'm hearing you say they'll do the regular 8th grade and then go into Algebra 1. So currently, the Algebra 1 generally falls into the high school. Is that
Correct. The
Okay.
majority of the 8th grade standards are pre-algebra that are preparing a child to be ready for Algebra 1.
Okay. So we're being very ambitious in terms of, because of what we see the importance of algebra is to try to get Algebra 1 into. And I'm saying that because it's a little confusing, especially when we're hearing about it, about students being selected and why they're being selected and what the other 8th grade curriculum is, so.
It allows for earning high school credit in the 8th grade, which then
Okay.
allows me to take higher level math within the high school grades that I normally wouldn't be able to do.
Okay. And in some cases, then these students can take that exam prior to entering high school.
And thinking about our philosophy, we would really, if you're talking about a student being college and career ready, we would really love for them to get through Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So getting Algebra 1 into the 8th grade just sets them up on that course for success.
So, but I think the questions you're getting at, and I think Commissioner McFadden are getting at, is, so I think you guys are doing a huge amount of work, and it's great that we're expanding access. So, I mean, we had really good results with the virtual algebra this year. I think this is the right direction. We're going in the right direction. I think if I'm intuiting correctly, what some of your underlying questions are is that then over time, we also want to make sure that we are getting to the point where all students are qualifying for Algebra 1. So it's not just the students who qualify for the honors algebra in 6th grade, but that the math curriculum that leads them up to 6th grade is putting everybody in a position where they're on a trajectory to be taking algebra in 8th grade. And I think that is your plan. I just wanted us to say that intention out loud, that's the overarching plan of the direction we're going, that this is the way to get there. We're building in the kind of the ladder to get more students there and to increase access, but that over time, ultimately, the goal is to get to all students taking algebra in 8th grade.
Ultimately, yes, but we just want to make sure that they're set up to be successful. Ultimately, yes, we just want to make sure that they're set up to be successful once they get there.
We're going to move into advisory. So our third area is around advisory. And again, research shows that students that have strong adult connections and have this opportunity to have a sense of belonging in a smaller community really feel more connected and have higher grades, higher attendance. It's linked to lower dropout rates. And so we really want to build this community within our schools, particularly in the middle grades, when it can be students are finding themselves and really need that someone that they know cares, as well as a group that they feel they belong to. So we're starting a cohort of schools to implement seminar because it also needs to be done well. So we want to provide training and resources for our schools. We are recommending that the schools do at least 3 times a week, a 15 to 20-minute seminar or advisory period, if you will. Ideally, every day, right? But being able to build that into the schedule can sometimes be challenging. So at least 3 times a week. We're also recommending that where possible, the school schedules that so that those groups are smaller and they're utilizing a variety of folks within the building beyond just teachers that can lead the seminar groups. So caring adults that want to make a difference with the students. They would stay with that group at least for that full year, and if possible, for all 3 years in the middle grades to continue to build that sense of a team, a community, a family. They would receive training and resources, which Eric has, and is going to bring a copy around for you, and you'll see a little more in the next slide about this, but this is a resource that we created for the teachers. And so training was done for the teachers. They received these resources. It's at their fingertips to support. We'll do ongoing professional learning community for them to really talk and discuss successes and challenges as they implement. We will add a mini lesson component next year, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We wanted to start out with the structure and the basis, which I'll go over shortly, and then we'll continue to add additional cohorts. So the booklet in front of you, the beginning or the teal pages just kind of give you an overview as well as a checklist for success. When you get to your purple pages, this is where we start the beginning of the actual seminar, where teacher or students, depending on where we are in the process, choose one of the breaths, and they actually do that breath 3 times together to transition into seminar to really be in the right space of mind. Then the teacher or students, because it can be student-led once you've modeled it. Students may be leading these portions. In the green section, there are different types of greetings. So each day, a greeting is done so that every student is greeted by name, by their teacher and or their peers. And again, just to create this sense of belonging in a family. Then in the sharing, this is tied right to restorative practices. It's done in a restorative circle. And it's also aligned to the CASEL competencies. And so one of the sharing prompts is done in a restorative manner, and you'll see some information around how to really do a restorative circle in the front, and then the various prompts that fall under each of the competencies throughout the pink pages. We chose, we looked at the schools that were in the restorative practice intensive sites for the blueprint as a starting point, because we really wanted schools to have had that training and ongoing support around implementing circles to do this well. Then when you get to the next portion, it's a little shorter. The green portion is just some ideas of what you might do in news and announcements. Things like announcing students' birthdays for the week, students announcing important things in their lives, announcing and reminding students of school events. And then we end with a breathing again. And again, it can be the same type of breath. It might be a different type of breath because now I'm gearing up to come back in to the school day. Any questions about seminar before we move to next steps?
I think it's fascinating, and there's a lot to absorb, but
Oh, also, and this is in next steps, but we'll add a mini lesson component next year. And the reason why we did not add that this year is, one, it's going to add about 15 minutes to this time frame. And 2, we wanted to align that. The whole child department will be looking at that for next year. We wanted to align it and give them a chance to really look at various models along with the teachers. So we'd have an opportunity to either identify something that's currently working and or have them help build mini lessons that could be implemented in seminar next year. So we kind of have a wonderful focus group. Or we're going to let them get started first, right? We'll have a wonderful focus group to actually utilize both in teachers and in administrators in these buildings. So they'll help us, and that's one of our next steps. So you see 4 next steps. One is portfolio group to consider schools with small middle grades and figure out how to make that work. And that next step's going to go on for several years. Build the mini lessons for seminar during the 18-19 school year, so this coming year with the teachers that are implementing the model. Continuing to look at the quarterly data around mathematics as well as around climate and attendance to really see if these initiatives are working and what we might need to support, as well as data from teachers and students around what is working. And then holding principal focus groups just to identify what do we need to do next, right? Is this enough? Is there something else we're missing? Where do we need to go next with middle grades initiatives?
Thanks, Ms. Shirey. This is, you said the focus group, the schools that this is being implemented, there are 10 schools now that are in this process?
So we are at 8 at this point. 2 schools found a big challenge with their schedules, so they want to wait.
That's my next question.
Yeah.
So do the schools have capacity to offer this type of advisory
Yes.
program?
Right, so we had all of our schools that were restorative sites, right, that were our restorative intensive sites, 10 of them actually had middle grades in them. So from those 10, initially, all 10 felt they would be able to implement. 2 of them had great difficulty when really looking at their schedule. So we're down to 8, and those 8 are ready to move forward. Of the 8, 5 have already been trained, and the 3 others have scheduled or in the process of identifying the best date to schedule that initial training. So we should be able to move forward. We also have notes from the trainers around how excited teachers are. This very simple, very, grassroots resource, teachers love. And so once they start sharing with friends, I anticipate they're going to say, we want this, and our response will be, that's great, we need to train you in it, right? And so as long as we can, and it's a quick, 1 hour training, and now we come back and give you support and get some, kind of initially along the way. Once you start this, the successes and challenges and really even in the training, how to overcome some of the hurdles has come from the teachers. And so we're just kind of getting it started with them by providing the resource, providing the training, and allowing kind of a forum for the conversation to occur.
In the restorative, so this would be done in addition to the work that they're already doing with the restorative practices?
Yes, so we've worked with the 2 vendors that we have chosen to support the blueprint, the iOS RP schools, and we have worked with them to build that into their action plan. So it's not just something else on top of that, it's actually incorporated in the work that they are doing. So,
And the sharing is the circle, right? So we're just adding a structure before and after you get to the sharing to make it a little more robust, and then we'll add the mini lesson in there in the following year, so.
So I love this, and how about if you wanted to get 2 more schools, could you look at the Castle intensive learning sites?
So we did consider them initially. We'd have to see if they were already trained in restorative practices. We certainly could do that. It's important that they're trained in restorative practices because when you get to the sharing part, we want them to understand how to really run the circle well so that it's successful. So we could certainly add 2 or even more. For us, it's not a huge cost because we've already created the resource, and it was the cost of paper, lamination, and time, right? And so for us, it's more about a school that is ready, can put it in their schedule, and has had that restorative practice training, and then we can support the implementation.
I'm smiling a lot because I think it's good to be around for a long time. I can remember when we moved from junior high to middle schools, and one of the big initiatives with the middle school, having the large middle schools, we were going to do all this work around the circles and the advisories, and we never really did the piece that you're doing now, which is the connection to restorative practices, but also the teacher resources and the ongoing training and feedback. So I think it's wonderful, and it's so nice to go back to the future. But I'm looking forward to I know this is going to be successful, but great job. But
Thank you.
Good work.
And if I could just say kudos to Dawn and Eric and Beth, and I know there's other people on your team that work on this, but I just think that when I think about where we were a year ago to where we are right now, I just think you've done yeoman's work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just have to second it too. This is between what you guys are doing with the math and then looking at the grade configuration, or the number of students in the middle grades, and then this student wholeness piece is really, you guys really making a huge difference in our middle school programming. So I can't thank you enough. It's really great.
And we'll make it more attractive, I think, so that we, increase enrollment.
We will relay that to the team. There's a lot more work to come, so.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, wow. A lot to read and continue to find out about. So now we're going to talk about teacher and principal pipelines, which if you just read the New York Times is a fascinating topic in the United States right now.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Pipelines Update. My name is Ashley Stewart. I'm the Executive Director for Talent and Organizational Development in Human Capital. In a minute, I'll let them introduce themselves to the commissioners once again. But just a quick note, for the last 2 years, we've provided a semi-annual update on teacher and principal pipelines to this particular committee. Today's update represents the fourth update since February 2017. The last update was earlier this year in February. This year's updates today, however, coincides with the first day of school, so we're able to incorporate some real-time data for you to capture as current a look as possible. So right now, I'll just say who you are.
Good afternoon, I'm Roxanne Four. I am the Director of Leadership Support Development for Principals.
Hi, my name is Sarah Deal. I'm the Executive Director of Recruitment and Staffing.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Grant Skinner, Chief Human Capital Officer.
And I'm Ashley Stewart. I'll be your host for the afternoon. All right. So, we're entering our second year of implementation of the Blueprint for Success, and one of the three areas of focus is leadership. When staff members have opportunities to grow as professionals and leaders, they inspire, create, and participate in high-performing learning communities that we think promote excellence and equity for all students. And so what you're seeing here is a variety of pipelines that we'll be discussing today. More and more, they are linking together to provide pathways for our educators to grow and for our school leaders to lead in their roles and in other roles across the district. This is not, however, a sort of step-by-step ladder where everyone is seeking to move from one rung to the next. At our Operations Committee meeting in November, the board will hear about our talent and organizational development work, which is intended to maintain a lattice where there are multiple opportunities to move among different levels and functions, whether it's side by side or up and down over the course of their career in city schools. Here you'll see the impact of our pipelines and what it looks like today in one of our schools. Our example today is from Commodore John Rogers, which is an elementary middle school, leading, which is now our 5-school collaboration in our 100% project. First, you'll see we have quality sourcing for our teachers. We use significant representation from the Baltimore City Teaching Residency, BCTR, Teach for America, and UT, including those first starting out and those who have been with us for many years. You will also see that the school's model teachers include one of the very first city schools model teachers and one of the most recent who just became a model teacher. The school recently hired an assistant principal who was until last year one of the district's lead teachers, and which of course is our highest pathway available to teachers in our agreement with the Baltimore Teachers Union. In terms of the principalship, one of the highlights on this slide, you'll see that the assistant principal was promoted from within the school, just like more than 20 other new APs across the school district this year. Commodore John Rogers has been and will again be host to principal residents training to be future principals in our district, and we're really excited and proud of that fact. In fact, one of the principal residents, and maybe that green band there, from last year was appointed to be an educational specialist who's working with all 5 of the schools in the 100% project. And Principal Martin is one of our principal mentors who himself is a transformational principal. Now, in different schools, there are different pipeline building activities, internal and external, traditional and alternative, new and continuing. But as they come together, they're coming together in different ways to support leadership at multiple levels. I really like this slide. What you see here is that our pathway and pipeline building work is really trying to help us achieve very ambitious goals that we've set for the leadership focus of the Blueprint. When our teacher and principal pipeline activities link really well together, they help to build very strong communities. And so on this slide, you'll see in our data that schools with higher teacher retention have higher ELA and math proficiency. All schools In fact, all schools with over 20% student proficiency have teacher retention rates over 60%. So here you can see our 2017 baseline and our 2020 targets for teacher retention as well as principals. Today, we'll share some updates on the leadership pipelines and pathways, along with some work about our new Baltimore Black teacher recruitment and retention working group. The team will give you some snapshots from our newest principals, assistant principals, resident principals, teachers, teacher residents, and teacher leaders. And then Jeremy will share a bit more data related to the new working group that's focused on increasing the numbers of Black teachers so that the numbers more closely match our city schools' student population.
I'm going to be a real layman person here. And so the question that I'm going to ask is something that it's been on my mind, and because I've had different people have a conversation about it. You're working on increasing the pipeline from one direction, from a teacher to the principal, is that right? Well, upward bound, I have opportunities for teachers to move up, professional development, things that we're doing. My greatest concern has always been we tend to have extremely good teachers in the classroom, and my concern is that we remove them from the classroom and put them in administration or in leadership as a principal, instead of doing what we can. Now, I may be off track in this conversation. Instead of doing what we can to encourage them to stay in the classroom and be the best and the finest, because we need them in the classroom. But I have seen, and as a person coming from higher ed, I've seen what I've seen, if you can help me here, and I'm sure that the community would want answers related to that. I have seen them take a good teacher and do what we're doing, which is a good thing, and encourage them to go into leadership. But what do we do to keep them, give them all the fluffs that we can give them to stay in that classroom where we really do need them? Because some universities, they do spend more time. I think Morgan no, I'm not going to go there. But I think that some universities spend more time encouraging students to go into, become a principal, instead of encouraging them to stay in the classroom and be the best and the finest. Is that what we're trying to do? Are we trying to move them out of the classroom into leadership?
Commissioner, I would say that you've struck on an important balance that we try to find. We have excellent teachers who lead from their space as teachers, and we also have excellent teachers who realize an interest in and show potential for other roles outside of the classroom. At last week's board meeting, the CEO and Dr. Johnson from the BTU recognized two of our model teachers as representatives of this group of more than 600 model teachers we have in the district. And I think that, years ago, the district negotiated the contract we have with the BTU specifically to try to create opportunities to keep our great teachers in the classroom and make it compelling for teachers when they're doing great work to also continue to think of classroom work as a good opportunity.
And really quick, I remember years ago, when we have always been anxious to hire more African American male teachers. And before, when we get an excellent African American male teacher in the classroom, it used to be, and I don't know if it's happening now, they tend to move them into leadership instead of keeping them in the classroom where we really need them. And I don't know if that's going on, and I'm sure you've done studies, I don't know. But my great concern still happens to be trying to keep some of those teachers and giving them professional development, giving them all the things and money, all those things that we need to keep them there, but try to keep those teachers in the classroom, because even though they show good leadership possibilities, we really need to keep them in those classrooms. Am I in the right direction?
You said, are you in the right
I
direction?
hope I'm in the right direction.
Yes, I think that's
My first day
absolutely
on
true.
Teaching and learning.
That's absolutely true. I think on the other side of that, we believe that our school leaders and other leaders really should be individuals who have experience as often as possible in the district as teachers. So it does mean that one source for our school leaders, our principals, our assistant principals, is going to be teachers. What I've heard from you that we as a district definitely are trying to do is make sure that that's not the only opportunity for someone to advance in their career, meaning leave the classroom.
Chief, in what ways are teachers able to be developed as leaders currently? What are some of those ways that a teacher can focus on their development as a leader and not necessarily going into school administration or, the appraisal, like all of that?
Sure. A couple things I'll point out, and I think we're going to get to one of these later, is so again, the model teacher pathway is one. So what the model teacher pathway did is created an opportunity for teachers who demonstrate really strong performance in the classroom with students to earn a salary of $80,000 or more when they experience that high level of performance early on in their career, even within a few years. So you don't have to be a teacher in city schools anymore for 20 or 25 years to get to that point, which in the past, when that was the case, it meant if you wanted to advance in your career, including through your salary, you almost had to leave the classroom. So that is one thing.
What are their responsibilities then? So the pay increases, but does that change the responsibility of their model pathway? Are they mentors? Are they, in some cases, department chairs? If on the secondary level, what does that look like?
They are all of those things. So as a model teacher, you remain a classroom teacher. So again, the idea is that you don't have to leave the classroom, that you can continue your work with students. But when you look at who are our mentor teachers in the district, they're often our model teachers. When you look at who are department chairs, they're often our model teachers. The other example I was going to use, which you're going to see some data on later, is we have 150 plus educational associates across the district. So these are teacher positions that looks different in different schools, but an educational associate is a non-administrator who usually is spending part of their time instructing students and part of their time outside of the classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move into the principal pipeline, and we are going to start with our developmental phrase that we want to use in order to develop our next leaders. So we are looking at the standards, we're looking at the induction program as well as the selection and hiring process, and then the supports that we give them. We understand that we still need to support them as they move into this role. So in preparing our principals, we are looking at our APs and how do we prepare them to move into the role of the principalship. How do we extend high-quality PD for our principals and APs so that they are getting the support that they need? And then how do we ensure that they feel supported? Currently, this year we saw a historically low number of principals leave the district, and you can see from these numbers that we had 12 leaving the district, although some of our current sitting principals did move into leadership roles here at the district, but we had 12.
Just to clarify, I'm confused. So those 12 left the district, or they left being principals?
The 12 left the
District.
district altogether. So there are a few other of last year's principals who are now serving in other positions in the district.
Thank you.
So when we look at the lattice that we are building, we do have a teacher lattice. That does include the emerging leaders, which is part of the new leaders program, the lead teachers and model teachers that Chief Grant Skinner referred to, as well as we will be piloting a Title I school-based teacher leader program this year. And we have specifically looked at our high-need schools and how do we successfully pilot this in order to retain and develop those teachers in high-need schools. We are also developing our assistant principals by creating the assessment center. We had over 255 applicants this year as we rolled out that new assessment center. We have a 2-year induction program to make sure that we are giving them the support and the skills and knowledge that they need to be ready to move into the principalship, as well as developing their coaching skills so that they can coach the teachers effectively using the instructional framework, which is already part of the work that we do in city schools. In addition, we have a grant in conjunction with TNTP, a seed grant, and this would be, if we get it, for the school year 2019 to 2021, and that would be developing a core group of our assistant principals who we feel are ready and they have an interest in fast tracking to really get the skills that they need to move into the principalship.
Have these, Ms. Ford, the Title I schools, have they been identified already for the pilot?
We have not identified those schools as of yet, no.
So this pilot, will that begin this year, or is it something that you're looking forward to do next school year?
We are looking to do it this school year,
Okay.
school year 18-19. And for our principals, we have updated the assessment center and revamped that, as well as developing a 2-year induction program for our first and second year principals. We have relaunched, I'll say, because we actually started the principal learning communities in the spring, and we will be relaunching and extending based upon what we learned in the spring, as well as in conjunction with Pizzazza. We have identified additional principles for the transformational pathway. This year, we will also be working with a group of 10 to 15 of our current experienced, exceptional principals to begin to mentor them and coach them to become mentors for our new principals, so that we always have a means to make sure we are working with our new principals.
You know, we've been looking at some of the possible recommendations that might be coming from the Kerwin Commission around various areas, and one of them around assistant principal and principal includes a percentage of time, I believe, where they are actually teaching in classrooms. To what extent, if any, have you sort of taken a look at that possibility as you're crafting this pipeline?
We've been in conversations with some of the principals and assistant principals that currently do that. We have not put anything in place, but we know that some do it successfully. So we're really just beginning those discussions.
I would just add that what we've seen in terms of what the Kerwin Commission may recommend, it would come with a significant price tag in order to free up the amount of time for assistant principals or principals to spend time in the classroom, and then vice versa, some other recommendations to have teachers spend less time with students.
All right. This year, we have 25 schools that have a newly appointed or reassigned principal, and these are our group of 25 principals. 8 were already city schools principals, and they were at a different school being reassigned. 2 are leading alternative programs, the Youth Opportunity and the new Angela Y. Davis Leadership Academy program. And 2 of the principals are leading separate public daycare programs at Claremont and Lois T. Murray.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Okay. All right. There are 17 first-time city school principals this year, with 91% of our traditional principals being led by a returning principal. All but 5 of our first city school principals were promoted from other positions within the district. 6 of those 17 are interim principals, and they come from a mix of preparation programs. 3 came through the Aspiring Principals Program, about half were assistant principals, and they also represent over 24 colleges and universities. And one of our newly assigned principals is Kelly Caridio, who has been with the district for 13 years. She was an assistant principal as well as coming through the New Leaders Program. She is a city resident, and all 5 of her children either attended or are attending city schools. This year, we did have a large number of newly appointed assistant principals. There are 50 schools that have 1 or more assistant principals new to the role or new to the school. So we have 18 of them were assistant principals last year or at a closing school last year. And 5 of those 59 are external hires. Excuse me. There are currently 186 assistant principals in 112 schools, which is up from last year. Last year, we had 174 in 109 schools.
Question.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, do we have a requirement? We don't have a requirement that our hires should be living in Baltimore, do we?
No, we
Like
do
the
not.
city of Baltimore was trying to make that a requirement for some positions. That's not our requirement.
No, it is not.
Do we encourage, or when we look at applicants who apply, would that be one of the important criteria that we would look at if they're from the Baltimore area or residents of Baltimore? Do we think about that when we're looking at them? Because we're in an urban community, and we know our profile of our kids and our families. And I would think, just like when you hire police officers or city employees, and before in the Schaefer administration, they required, on the Smoke administration, they required people to live in Baltimore and encourage people to buy homes and, purchase homes in Baltimore, the police teacher program.
So that would be something that might be interesting for not just principals, but in general, but it might not be what we're talking
What
about
I'm
right
talking
now.
about, we were talking about hires, when people were hiring. I'm just asking a question. Is that one of the things that we should look at or think about?
We can certainly think about that. Moving forward, we have not, as far as I know, but I will defer to the chief.
Right, so there is not currently a criteria in our hiring for any position. That would be a requirement to live in Baltimore City. It is, I think, something that we could look at, sort of all of the pros and cons of that. I will say we did look at while on the front end, it wasn't a deciding factor, we looked at among this group of assistant principals where they live. And just over 3/4 of them live in Baltimore City or Baltimore County. To be clear, about 30% live in the city.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are 41 first-time assistant principals, and that's representing nearly 1/4 of all assistant principals. So the vast majority, they were promoted from other positions. 6 in 10 were either teacher leads, such as lead teachers or model teachers, educational associates, And we were able to really form a competitive pool with over 250 applicants. Yeah. One of our newly appointed assistant principals is Troy Mitchell, who is at Forest Park. And he comes to us after serving in several schools and also being part of the universities and having a partnership as well as being an adjunct professor. He is also a proud alum of Baltimore City College. This year, we have 10 resident principals, and they will be working with 11 mentor principals. We were very intentional this year to make sure that we provided each of the mentor principals and resident principals a good match. We also were cognizant of the need that we see at high school, so we wanted to make sure that we were giving them an opportunity to have that experience in a high school under one of our expert principals. So we were able to do that, as well as giving them 2 experiences by semester, so they will see multiple leadership styles this year.
Ms. Ford, is that the only, because I don't think this has happened before, the residents being in between 2 schools. So can you talk just a little bit more about that split, and the reasoning for them just saying two different? Is it one primary and then one secondary? Is that it? No?
No, it's not necessarily one primary and secondary. We want to make sure that we are exposing our new leaders and our upcoming principals to really a variety of leadership styles, a variety of schools, as well as grade bands. So by doing a split this year, they will have an opportunity to experience that.
And it's in alignment with new leaders, their programming, their curriculum, it's all aligned?
We have and continue to work through all of that, yes.
Okay.
I have been in constant communication around that.
I would just add that in the earlier days of our new leaders' work, there was a split like this. It wasn't quite by semester, but resident principals would be with one principal for the majority of their tenure, and then for the last several weeks, they might go to another school if that option was available. So this is something that New Leaders has done before in the past. But not
like
this way for this specific purpose. That's right.
Okay. All right, our 10 resident principals are all internal candidates who come to us from Baltimore City Schools. And a large number of them will have a transformational principal who will be guiding them and giving them their expertise. We were able to make sure that we did not have to tap into school-based funds in order to make sure that we could be intentional about the placement. And one of our resident principals this year is Justin Holbrook, who is a 2017 Teacher of the Year finalist. He also has been recognized by Gray's Matter in national documentaries, and the founder and moderator of Be More Ed Chat founder.
All right, good afternoon. So related to teacher pipelines, we're going to share updates on teachers, teacher residents, and teacher leaders. All right, so as you may know, the state of Maryland prepares only half the number of new teachers needed annually. So we do rely on a variety of teacher pipelines for our broader recruitment efforts. So this slide shows the number of new teacher hires for the last 3 years, as well as our largest recruitment partners. So Ashley mentioned the real-time nature of some of our data at the beginning of the presentation, and it's critically important with this slide, given that the principals and the human capital partners have continued hiring for any remaining vacancies right up to day one, and so the 2018 number is from a couple of days ago. That being said, this year, the almost final number of newly hired teachers is 555, which is up 30% over last year, and it's the highest number in the last 3 years. What you don't see on this slide is another big positive trend and huge accomplishment, which is that we open schools today with just over 100 teacher vacancies. I think the actual number is about 106.5. But this represents less than 2% of the teacher positions and is down by nearly 25% from last year's number of first-day vacancies. So what I do want to do, it's really a huge accomplishment for human capital. I know that we have a ways to go, but I did want to take a moment. We asked a couple of some of our key staff members to come today. They play a critical role, are closest to the ground, and so I do want to publicly acknowledge Kim Williams, William Morant, Zakia McAllister, and Diane Sellers.
Can you guys all stand up, please?
So they represent the bodies of work ranging from recruitment to certification to school-based and district office staffing. And they and their teams are critical partners to school leaders in the work. So I did want to take a moment and just acknowledge them. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. That's great.
Yeah, sure. So then lastly up here, so traditional colleges and universities and our alt-cert programs are all other critical and important partners in the work as well. And so here are the top 5 sources among traditional institutions of higher ed partners, along with our 3 alternative certification program partners.
I have something quick. Commissioner James Hassan, she references sometimes that para-educators, are they a part of the pipeline work? Are we looking at para-educators, having them become certified classroom teachers? Is that a part of what we're looking at right now?
So we are. So I think at the last public board meeting, Commissioner James Hassan asked a question about this and highlighted that our Black Teacher Recruitment and Retention Working Group has identified this as one of the 4 topics to look at this year. We also had a late spring meeting with the Baltimore Teachers Union about how to relaunch and reinvigorate a para-teacher program that was in place before. The Baltimore Teachers Union has a fully released staff member who is dedicated 100% to a para-teacher program. And as Sarah and I were talking about earlier, we have a follow-up meeting with the CEO and the Baltimore Teachers Union just this week to continue that conversation.
Before you leave that slide, just one question I have to ask, and I mean, kudos to what we've done in terms of the recruitment and hiring. Any first thoughts as to why the number was so high this year? I mean, I saw a lot of retirements, but I'm not certain if that's the only reason. But any trends?
I appreciate that question because when you look at the change from last year to this year, it would be easy and logical to assume that means we had higher turnover this year, and actually we did not. So it looks like our teacher retention rate this year was actually 1 percentage point higher than it was last year.
Okay.
So really this represents more positions this year compared to last year when we were in a very different environment. This year, schools created more teaching positions compared to last year, which created a need for hiring. And then things like the fact that we have 50 or nearly 50 new assistant principals, and we hired or are almost at 20 for new literacy coaches. Like, these are things that kept people in the district, but in some cases created a need for more teachers.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right. So here you can see the number of newly hired teachers by job title and content area. We have the numbers and we also have the percentages. So as you can see, about 38% of our new hire teachers are elementary teachers, about 26% are teacher secondary, and about 8% teach the K-12 certification areas. So the areas highlighted in red have consistently been among the hardest to staff when comparing supply and demand over the course of the summer or this staffing season. And so as we head into the upcoming recruitment season, we will, of course, keep our eye on these critical areas, the math, special ed, ESOL, and foreign language. But we know that we also need to establish some new strategies and partnerships to specifically address our growing city schools demand and particularly the challenges around recruiting for some of our vocational teachers. All right. So for this school year, as we said, we hired more than 550 new teachers, and a majority of our schools opened with no teacher vacancies. So below is some interesting statistics regarding recruitment and new hires this year. So I think that we've already talked about the 140 increase in new teacher hires. So for the top three, so Towson, Morgan State, and Coppin State were our top three traditional sources of newly hired teachers last year. We'll know the official ranks for this school year soon, and we know that these three universities will continue to be among the top three. But I do want to say that this year, our first early contracts were offered in February to several Morgan State University students who were completing internships in city schools. 65 represents the 2017 to 18% increase in urban teacher, new teacher hires this year. So as we'll talk about in a future slide, we did expand our partnership with Urban Teachers, which has a distinctive model offering a full-time, full-year residency in preparation for becoming a full-time teacher. And as we increased the total number of newly hired teachers, we also increased the percentage of newly hired teachers coming from traditional programs or entering with a conditional certificate up to 60%, with the other 40% of newly hired teachers coming through three of our alternative certification programs. 4 represents the number of budgeted recruitment FTEs in fiscal year 19, which is up from 1 last year. So we're really excited about the potential and the expansion of our recruitment team this year. And then finally, $80,257 is the salary offered to our most veteran teachers who are newly hired to city schools. So we updated this for this year to account for additional years of experience in an effort to ensure that we are attracting veteran teachers to the city. All right. So we wanted to introduce you to one of our new hires this year. Federa Garnes is a new special education English teacher at Connections. So Federa is a career changer, and after her patrol car was burned down during the uprising in 2015, she knew that she wanted to make an impact in a different way. So this summer, she decided that her impact could be in the classroom, and she joined the Baltimore City Teaching Residency. So she's thrilled about the opportunity to have her own classroom and for the broader impact that being a teacher can have on the community. So I mentioned our expanded Urban Teachers Partnership, and this slide gives a snapshot of our 84 new teacher residents serving and training across 33 schools this year. So in addition to their full-time, full-year residency model, something that makes Urban Teachers unique is that 100% of its program completers earn dual certification in special education. Among the 33 schools with Urban Teacher residents this year, 9 are Title I literacy-intensive sites that serve middle grades, which ensures that the Urban Teacher Partnership is linked to other important district initiatives. And then finally, here's a look at one of our Urban Teacher residents. So Shauna Thomas is a vibrant singer from Park Heights and a 2018 Urban Teacher resident. Being from Baltimore City and living with a city schools teacher afforded her the opportunity to see how rewarding a career in urban education could be. She's currently working at Hollibird in a 5th grade classroom, and she prides herself on her impact in the classroom and the potential that she'll have on the broader community. She will be earning a master's degree with dual certification in elementary education and special education.
can take it. Do you want it? Okay. So within the larger picture of our pipelines work, we have excellent teacher leaders that we talked about earlier, leading from their space. Commissioner Bondima, to your point, we have excellent teachers who are demonstrating the instructional leadership skills that we want for all of our teachers to exhibit, whether they stay in that role or move on to other positions within the district. So this slide really highlights some of the variety of teacher leadership roles that we offer that Jeremy and others talked about earlier around our teacher pathway roles, the model teachers, lead teachers, along with our educational associates positions. I just want to point out that we have more than 600 model teachers in the district. They are among our best educators. We regularly check in on them, on their performance of our model educators, and we looked at our first peer-reviewed model cohort from 2012, and 51% of our continuing models were rated highly effective 5 years in a row. Another new teacher leader role created this year was the literacy coach role that Chief Grant Skinner mentioned, with soon to be a full 20 literacy coaches serving across the literacy intensive sites. And finally, we've allocated Title I funds to launch, as Roxanne talked about, a leader, design a pilot for a new school-based teacher leadership role next year.
Stuart, I'm not clear on how model teachers are, how we're defining them as teacher leaders. Because I guess it varies from school to school what their responsibilities may be, besides just them undergoing the pathway work to achieve that model status and receiving that bump in pay. Like, what specifically are these model teachers doing as teacher leaders? Are their principals giving them other responsibilities, some shared type of responsibilities? Are they working on the school family council or the school performance plan, whatever that's called now? Are they working with that now? Or is it not clearly defined, the model teacher role as a teacher leader in a building?
Yeah, it's a very good and important question, and something that I think we want to actually learn more about. Mr. Stewart works closely with the Joint Governing Panel, which is a group of 3 teachers who report to the district and to the Baltimore Teachers Union about how the Baltimore Teachers Union contract is going. What I think I know we want to learn more about is actually what the experience of our model teachers is. So we don't have data that says 100 of them are serving in this capacity and 50 of them are serving in this capacity. I think it would be good for us to learn that. At the same time, the one perspective on this for sure is that the purpose of the model teacher pathway was to ensure that teachers could earn a much higher wage and salary without having to change anything about their day-to-day. And I think it's something that we're discussing, and we're trying to figure out whether we as a district still believe that. But ultimately, it was never intended, and it's not written into our negotiated agreement that it comes with any specific additional responsibilities, but rather that it is recognition for high levels of performance and ongoing learning, rather than a different job description. So it's different than a lead teacher, which is another pathway for teachers, which actually is a promotional opportunity that changes your job. The reason I am saying that we still should learn more about this is I do believe that there is great potential in leveraging our model teachers in different ways and more coordinated ways. So I know that if we had our 170 plus principals here, that they could probably answer this much better in saying these are all the ways that our model teachers are actually adding value beyond the classroom, but we haven't coordinated what that looks like.
See that, though, because if we're deeming them as leaders within a building, I just think it would be nice to see that. But it's a work in progress from what I hear you saying.
Yeah, I think, yes, work in progress, and there are different philosophies about what a model teacher should be. And one of those philosophies is it is just someone who is performing their craft as a classroom teacher at the ultimate level.
All right, so we wanted to give you a snapshot of one of our fantastic lead teachers. This lead teacher, Rhea Lastica Espedido, has been a lead teacher at Liberty Elementary since 2014. She supports other teachers through instructional coaching. She steps into special education classes and services with students and implements all kinds of reading interventions with students in grades 3 through 5. As you can see, before stepping into this role, she served as a reading intervention and special education educator for more than 8 years. She is certainly she's a teacher mentor within city schools and is recognized as a national board certified teacher, receiving the Hall of Fame award from the Filipino Educators Association of Maryland.
So the last segment of our presentation today is really closely connected, but also here because we just wanted to take advantage of an opportunity to give you an update on a working group that has come together over the last few months. So the Black Teacher Recruitment and Retention Working Group formed between district staff and community advocates and teachers and other community members to figure out ways that we can collectively make sure that our teacher workforce is even more representative of our student population. So this year, a higher percentage of our teachers identify as Black or African American than any time since 2011. But even with that, the percentage is still a little bit above 40% in a district where nearly 80% of our students are Black. So we came together saying that we wanted to find a way to make that gap shrink. So we held our first public meeting at the end of July. Here in this room, we had a second public meeting on August 21st at Dorothy I. Height, and our next one is at Forest Park on the 18th of this month at 5:30. And the final few slides here are just to share some background about what this group is looking at as we figure out how to increase this number even more. This shows retention data over the last 14 or 15 years among Black teachers and among all other teachers. What you'll see is if you look over time, that there is not much difference in the retention rates year to year between Black teachers and other teachers. The most recent 2 years, it was exactly the same at 84%. That does not mean that the reasons necessarily are the same for different teachers choosing to leave their role as a teacher. And that's partly what this group is looking at. This shows actually the same information over the same years, except instead of looking at a percentage, it looks at the number of teachers who were Black and number of teachers who were not Black who left the district. So you can see that in the earlier years, further towards the left, when we look at the raw numbers, we were losing as a district a higher number of Black teachers each year than other teachers. And in recent years, that has reversed. One of the perhaps historical reasons and also challenges that we will still face here is that among our Black teachers, a higher percentage of them are retirement age or near retirement age than our other teachers. So on the left side, those blue bars show the percentage of Black teachers each year who are above age 60, and on the right side, the blue bars are showing other teachers who are retirement age each year. And then one other key piece of data that we've looked at as a working group so far is the percentage of newly hired teachers each year who are Black. We'll soon have an update for the 18-19 school year on this data point, but if we look back to the last 2 years, it was 50%. It's gone up each of the last 4 years to match what it was back in the 2004 school year. So that was a really quick snapshot at some of the underlying data that has caused us to bring together this group. More than 100 people have engaged in either the public meetings or in core team meetings, which also meet each month. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of ideas, and we're spending our time through next June coming up together with a set of recommendations for how we can increase that number. The para to teacher program or different activities is one of the focus areas. Another is about certification, and another is about how we can encourage and support our own city school students to get interested in and pursue careers in education. So with that, we'll take any other questions you all have.
It's fascinating information that you have given us, a lot to digest. Thank you. Are there more questions?
Just one for the group that's taking a look at our black teachers. It'd be interesting, and maybe you've already done this, just to see what difference we may have seen as some of the districts around us have become more diverse. What impact that's had on recruiting more black teachers to work in those districts that at one time were not necessarily recruiting them. I can just recall times when many of our teachers, city teachers, have been recruited by other districts as they have felt that things have become more challenging because they're more diverse. So that might be just one of the interesting side things to take a look at. And then what strategy we can do that would counter that, because we're all needing good teachers. And again, I would definitely hope that we take a better look and a closer look at things that we can do to encourage our own students to consider going into the field.
That's what I was going to refer to in the presentation with teacher recruitment and retention, or recruitment. Didn't hear anything about us articulating the profession to students that are in high school or transitioning out. And with our young people now being able to go to Baltimore City Community College for free, are there ways to extend that or partner with that, Dr. Bondima? In order for them to continue maybe at a 4-year university, and then perhaps, idea, could we incentivize, for these young people who are on this track to, if you like, similar to Teach for America, similar to that, like you do a commitment for some time. I don't know, and we might take the cost or something.
I'd just like to thank you for that. I would like to bring up an old idea. Not that I'm old, but I was an old idea that worked. Several years ago, I ran a program, even though I was a dean at BCCC. It's called ACE program. Those of you can remember. And also with 5 different colleges and universities and Baltimore City Public Schools, we received a grant. And I know we have a new grant person here. Is that right, Allison? We have a new grant person or someone, well, anyway. Maybe we don't. Anyway, we should.
Yes.
But anyway, and we received, I wrote a grant for $1 million to DeWitt Wallace Reader's Digest. And we started a program through ACE program called Project Prime, Programs to Recruit and Inspire Minorities into Education. And it was outstanding, excellent. And we went into, it was 5 different colleges involved. And we worked with Western High School and several other high schools. But we had a special club in each school, and these were students who were interested in going into teaching. And those students, we worked with them during the summer months, and special projects. We had teachers come in and work with them. You remember that, don't you? And Morgan was the lead institution for that grant, and I was involved on that board. But it's a good idea for you to think about doing, because out of that program, we managed to track kids coming into the 9th grade and worked with them, teachers and college professors. And out of that program, I would say we managed to get 25 students, which really, that's a lot. We started out with a lot more, but 25 students end up graduating from high school, going into colleges and universities that, and they majored in education. And some of those teachers, those students are still practicing in Baltimore City or other colleges. But I think that we need to start, and I said this a long time when I first came here, we really need to think about looking at grants and opportunities to recruit and go right into the classroom. We have a lot of students who are interested in going into education, and we need to show them the beauty of education, the wonderful things that's occurring in the classroom. Those students, they see their teachers working, and that's something, and it's not anything we need to keep passing by, because what I'm talking about, other places are doing this.
It's a good idea. It is, yeah.
So, and that program, and I actually had the old grant, it was that thick, programs to inspire minorities into education. So just an idea you can think about.
And I think we probably need to move on to procurement at this point, just time-wise. Thank you. Thank you. Fascinating. Thank you. Oh, you had another question?
No, not
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome. Thank
I'm
you.
Joe Vogel, Purchasing Manager, presenting the procurement agenda. Would you like me to go through each briefly, or do you want to just go right to questions because we're over? We're out
Are
of
there
time.
questions?
Maybe because I do procurement, I don't know.
Okay, do you want to take these one at a time? Is your question
Okay,
on
no,
rating?
go ahead, you start. No, go ahead.
Okay. On classroom materials?
Now, with this, it was a, yes, ma'am. It was just within, I saw Anne Arundel County was referenced in the. Anne Arundel County Schools.
Yes, what we do sometimes is we actually piggyback other LEA's contracts that go through a competitive procurement, much like we do here at City Schools. And Anne Arundel County did a competitive procurement for supplemental classroom materials. We looked at that contract, and it meets what we do here at City Schools, so that's what that means. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, are we, so is this, so there was, we had some good things that came out of this consulting before, so that's why we're continuing this consulting agreement?
That is correct.
And are we looking to continue with them ongoing, or is this just a 18-19 fix for school leaders?
This is for 18-19, and part of what we have added is the coaching of the mentors. So that is part of this, so that we can start to bring things in-house internally and develop a sustainability plan.
So we currently don't have the internal capacity to do this or use this funding for internal work, or do we have to do the outside consult?
We need another year to do the outside consult as we start to bring it in-house.
Which is why this is for 18-19?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then, like I said, it has the added piece to make sure that we are building the capacity this coming year.
So that we can continue on our own?
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, is that? You have a question?
Are you finished with
Yeah.
Just wondering, because I just mentioned it's my first meeting with teaching and learning. This is procurement information. Will this come over to operations? No.
So these items, these items are designated as items that make sense for teaching and learning, and
Okay.
then they go from here to the full board.
Okay, that's right. So I won't see this Okay.
Nope, you see, this is, you read comments here, and then you'll see it again when it comes to the full board.
Okay.
But the hope is that the subcommittee meeting is the place where like, most questions are addressed, so that then when it goes to the full board, is largely just.
Okay, I just saw procurement and, okay.
We get those too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was wondering, because what I would like to do, if you had questions in reference to this here, we could make sure we jot down and keep those questions, make them available to our operations committee so that we wouldn't have to keep asking the same questions over again. That was what my concern. So good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did we get any requests for public comment? No. Okay, thank you.
Today was a great first day back to school.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was very, very exciting. So our next meeting date will be October 2nd from 3:30 to 5:30 here in this room. And thank you all for being here, and very meaty agenda, a lot of good information. Thank you. Thank you.